Here.
Here.
Present.
Yes.
Present.
Here. Reverend McDowell, you mind giving us a word of prayer, please?
Oh Lord, in the midst of all that we are charged to do, in the midst of all of the things that are happening in our world today, our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, the children who are suffering in such a way that little kids are dying because of not having water to drink and not being fully hydrated. Lord, we simply ask that you might be with those who are directing and leading this charge, because it could easily become not only Ukraine, but it could easily become the United States with all of the vicissitudes there. So we ask your guiding presence as we move through this season of Lent. We can easily define ourselves by giving up something for Lent. But how about defining ourselves in peace and love and collaboration and reconciliation? Be with this city of ours as we discuss and move forward this onward move to be a city sitting on top of a hill. Touch us individually and collectively. Allow us to sense your presence, not only in this place, but in this city of ours and every community that perhaps is hurting right now. We ask it, claim it, in the powerful name of him who is to come again. Amen.
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 Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second? Any discussion, any changes? Not seeing or hearing, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
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 Aye.
Aye. As we're going to start the discussion, I know Ashley is going to start. The first one is the standing committees of council. And I think at this point, I would like us to make a decision on how we're going to move those committees forward. I know there's been some confusion about referrals versus calling a committee and so forth, and I think we should establish protocol moving forward on how we want to utilize those. My vision would be is that we would use these councils really as true working committees, so that we can get through a lot of issues and be able to really advance the ball forward. It would be helpful if we could decide on a protocol on how we call forward on the meeting and not just being, I think what the sentiment seems to be from council is that we would have the ability to call the committee meeting, working through, obviously you need to coordinate that with the clerk so that we have everything that is noticed to the public, but also that we have recordings and staff available for those meetings. So is that the wish of council, as that's how we're going to move forward?
I think that the committee meeting should be called by the committee chair. You only got 3 people, so the other 2 can ask the chair, and if you got 2 out of 3 agreeing to it, then that committee can call a meeting. Yeah, chairman, it needs to be called by the chair.
So if it's, so we're looking at it on two-edged sword. So if we do a referral, yes, to whatever that committee is, and the chair can call. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
All right.
Or the chair can call for
Right.
a committee, just a general.
Discuss an item.
Yeah, to discuss an item.
Or be briefed.
And just so I'm clear, so we're not saying that the committee has to wait until it gets a referral?
Correct. Is there any concern with that or questions? Yeah, we good. So is that good with you, Madam Clerk? Second.
Yes.
You need a motion on that?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Do we need to make that an emotion, TK, or is that?
Can't vote.
That's right, can't vote.
So consensually, we agree.
We can all wink.
We'll just
All right.
adopt it at the next council.
Yeah, we can just put it on the agenda for the next council if we need to have a motion and a vote, put that under other items. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Woods?
Mayor, we are going to just have a few brief slides that Ashley has put together. And I think the first few slides, as you've already talked about, the standing committees, and then, of course, you have several special committee, I'm calling them specials, special committees, task forces, and commissions of council. If you would like to turn into your binder, as you've already addressed the standing committees, the assignment of the staff liaisons, I've made those for you. And so your very first page after your standing committee section shows your makeup of those committees that you've now determined will be called at the pleasure of the chair. I think my understanding is you're still gonna have the referral section on the agenda in case another council member wants to refer something into the committee. But these individuals, and I will work with you on those committees, and obviously, they're listed for you and you know what they are. So with that, I'll let Ashley start going through just some brief slides, which will then take us to the special committees, and I have a couple of notes to share with you on those as well.
Just going to go over a quick overview. So as we've already said, the City of Columbia has several standing committees, special committees, task force, and commissions of City Council, as well as external boards and commissions. So the committees, task force, and boards are designed to allow council to gather information, explore options, and make informed decisions that will affect citizens. They also serve as an opportunity for citizens to volunteer and get involved with city government. And the boards and commissions mostly operate in an advisory sense or capacity to council. They help advocate and advise City Council as well. So the purpose of this update is basically to provide the current status of boards and commissions and City Council task forces, to discuss the vacancies, and then also current appointment process and any potential enhancements for the City of Columbia boards and commissions appointment process. Just a few stats for you on the current layout of the boards that you'll find in your binder. We have 6 City Council standing committees, 9 special committees, task force, and commissions, 5 land use boards, and then 31 external boards and commissions, all of which are sectioned in your binders and actually labeled by those categories. Of course, first is the lineup of the standing committees from administrative policy all the way through technology. And those are in the first section of your binder with tabs 1 through 9, it should be, 1 through 6. And then also just a little bit about the state code that kind of the city code that governs the boards and commissions. That's in your presentation as well. You can read over that. And then under special committees, task force, and commissions, like Ms. Wilson mentioned, there are staff liaisons noted, and we can also discuss citizen appointments.
And so for that section, again, all did a really good job over the course of your last few council meetings to discuss these, some newly established special committees, task forces, and commissions. But we tried to lay them out for you in the memo, as well as, thank you, Corey, as well as they are listed, the 9 of them, with the tabs for you, each of them with a memo and any information, if we had any information, pertaining to those. Again, I would bring your attention to the staff liaisons that I've assigned for these, as well as, I think the highlights may reflect just some housekeeping that you haven't taken care of yet, like a chairperson, mayor, if you're going to have one, for Fort Jackson Joint Committee, Columbia-Fort Jackson Joint Committee on Cooperation. I hope you all are seeing this memo and following along with me. And then the second page has that there should be a chair, I think, to be appointed for short-term rentals.
I'm in the book.
I'm sorry, it's actually in your binders, and it says new and updated, and it has highlighted portions. It's right at the beginning of your special committee and task force section.
Okay, and so with the task force to prevent and end homelessness, I think the makeup of that committee has already been outlined when you all established the task force. And of course, Chairwoman Bustles will be leading that, but the chief of police is to be involved, the president of the 5 Points Association, Elmwood Neighborhood Association, and executive director of CCP. So we were just noting for you, being that you're talking about appointments today, that this was one where 2 additional citizens are referenced that you will appoint. The same for the Tax Modernization Committee. You all indicated that you would be appointing 4 citizens, or appointing them, it says by the mayor. So again, we were just simply bringing these to your attention. I'm not sure that you're wanting to deal with them today or on the next council meeting.
Are these listed somewhere else in here or just in the front?
They are also behind your tabs for each respective
Okay,
one.
because if you could, it probably would be a good help to go ahead and add the names of the people we know that are on there. And frankly, it might even help to get from their association when their term expires.
So,
For example, Steve Cook's the president of the 5 Points Association, for a term. And so when Steve's term would end, the new 5 Points Association person would come on, correct?
You're talking about homelessness.
But that one's only 6 months.
6 months.
So the
Okay.
likelihood of him
Okay.
turning is
If that's the
low.
case, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But any standing committee is what you're referring to.
and we're gonna get to those external ones, and it'll be listed there for you, Mr. Taylor, their appointments and terms and all of that. These were just, the ones that you all established, and so, again, whenever you're ready to deal with these particular ones, Mayor, you all just let us know. Okay, and
Ashley, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
And I'm looking at the, where's the administrative committee?
That's in your front tab.
Yes, sir.
That's
It's under your standing committees.
that's all the way in the front, Eric.
This book is so voluminous, I gotta navigate my
Yes,
way
sir.
through this
So
thing.
we've separated it. You have the standing right in front.
All
And
right,
then these tabs right here actually help you flip through the sections.
all right,
Yes, sir.
all right, I got it now.
Yes, sir. No
Thank you,
problem. You're welcome.
thank you,
You're welcome.
thank you.
You're welcome.
so those were just the relevant notes. Those were kind of quick, the standing and the specials. So we can definitely deal with those later if you don't choose to deal with those right now.
I think the idea would be, at least I hope, is that we can get the 2 additional citizens to the homelessness and the additional to the tax done, as quickly as possible so that we can get those moving, because they all have deadlines they all have deadlines attached to them.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm hoping that we could kind of round this off and maybe even get it done to be in time to be on the agenda for next Tuesday. Yep.
So I'm clear on all of the new committees, that's really a mayor assignment, not a.
Actually, the only one that's by the mayor is the tax committee, from what I'm reading in here.
And homeless.
And homeless.
Okay. I didn't think that, I thought that was a,
Ms. Taylor, I heard you say that on the 22nd, there are some folk coming in under the tax.
somewhere, and we ain't got the exact date.
Okay.
As soon as I get it, we'll.
Let us know, because we will, you'll let Erica know.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe we could do
All right,
one after the other.
okay.
There's one of the economists that happens to go be in the South that week. We may save some money by that.
So, Mayor, we are putting together your agenda for the 15th, obviously, right now, so let me know if you want us to list those appointments on there.
I'd hope that I can try to get that nailed down. I need to talk to Dr. Bustles and some other folks on the homeless, but I mean, I think hopefully before, you go to print on Thursday and it can be regular to send out for Miss Erica by Friday.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can we work off this paper instead of the thick book? Doesn't this have everything in it?
It has it has the current vacancies and vacancies forecasted through June.
We're gonna get right there, sir. We're about to get there. So we are now at your land use boards and external boards and commissions. So Ashley, do you want to talk quickly about what information we have here?
So for the land use boards, and you'll find that segment in your binder, for each we have the purpose, the composition, bylaws or ordinance or the governing documents, and their current membership list, which lists their current citizen appointments, and then we also have vacancies and the forecast of vacancies for second quarter. So that's April through June. So that separate list that you were referencing, Councilman McDuvall, is the forecast of vacancies.
So what I think we wanted to do was provide you the information for every single solitary board, land use, and/or otherwise, with the composition, the bylaws, the current makeup as we know it, the current members as we know it. For the land use, of course, those are BOZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals form-based code. You'll see a memo for that one from Krista where they really aren't meeting. I mean, they haven't met in some time. The Building Board of Adjustment and Appeals as well, it's very similar. Then you have Ddrc and Planning Commission. For the current forecast, to your point, Mr. Duvall, if you would like, before we turn to all the other external boards and commissions, Ashley can bring to your attention from this sheet if there are any that are related to any of the land use boards as you go through your book, if you would like to. Are there any, Ashley, for being forecasted? And Krista's here as well.
Yeah, she is. There's definitely planning listed, as well as Building Board of Adjustment and Appeals, as well as Design Development Review Commission, and Board of Zoning Appeals form-based codes, all of which, if you want deep down information regarding code, et cetera, Krista would be able to explain.
Yeah, the planning commission actually has 2 vacancies, because Dr. Mandela has served multiple terms, and
yes,
it's
sir.
not shown on that sheet correctly. She's not eligible for
Yes, sir.
reappointment. So
Yes,
that needs
sir.
to be corrected.
Yes, sir. I remember the you all decided that you didn't want to appoint. So yes, sir, we'll update that to reflect her
Looking
position
at
as well.
planning. Because I was trying to go through, and I think these are important that we should go through, and obviously, we got the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is the first one, which right now, you don't have any, it looks like nobody until May is up. So we have a full board, and they are all attending, correct, Ms. Hampton? And then, you know, the Board of Zoning Appeals form-based, which is the next one. Yeah, absolutely.
Just want to make sure. The appointments, the opening of the terms, the ending of terms, the future appointments will be coordinated by you, correct?
Yes, sir, but
I heard somebody mention that Ms. Hampton was coordinating something on something. I just want to make, so all the appointments would come through you.
yes, sir. So it comes through myself, but the terms and how long we advertise it, like say for instance, you all decide you want to do it beyond 2 weeks or advertise beyond 2 weeks, that's determined by you, and I do
Okay, but
how.
my point is, you'll be our central contact
Yes, sir.
for all openings and stuff that we have to vote on. That's what I was just trying to get.
Yes, sir.
We just asked Krista to be here in case you had some information, you know, she could share about, you know, certain individuals
I
participating.
just wanted to clarify that for us, it would
Oh,
come
yes.
to a single point of contact,
Yes.
and we wouldn't be from every different department. that we
No,
work.
sir.
No,
That-
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, Mayor, I think you covered BOZA, and then again, I would draw your attention to the memo that I did ask Krista to provide about the form-based codes, because, again, that one, there just haven't been any requests, I think, that necessitated them meeting a whole lot.
I just had a question from a legal standpoint. Is this necessary to have a separate committee for this, or is that something that BOZA could do in its current form?
Legally, it's not required, except for it was in the development agreement. So the development agreement would need to be amended. It was requested as part of that negotiation
For Bull Street.
for Bull Street. And opinions may differ on that, but I certainly think that it could go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, the General Board of Zoning Appeals. Most of what is
So this
necessary.
form-based is only for Bull Street?
Correct. It's only for anything that would be
Know that.
with a form-based code,
something
and the
today.
Bull Street PUD is the only form-based code we have. So it was established strictly for that development.
And it has 2 current vacancies.
And what would we need to do to combine it? Just that we would take a vote and a resolution or an ordinance, or?
It's in the development agreement. So
It's-
wouldn't that have to change?
Correct, yeah, and I believe that the developer would also need, so that's governed by state statute. TK would need to weigh on that, but that would require a renegotiation of that part of the development agreement. Which does come up, I mean, it's required every 5 years that be reviewed and renewed.
So in 2 years, right? Or is it 3?
I think it's more like 3,
It's 8 now, right? We're in year 8 as of July 1.
I believe so. So we'd have to wait until that time.
So the time to change that is when the redevelopment. So what we need to do is make sure that we've got people on those boards. So it looks like to me there's 2 openings, and you may need to reappoint. I mean, Charles Brooks is on here, but his term ended, all these, 2 of them ended in 2008, in 18, and haven't been reappointed, and then we have 2 openings. So question is, do you reappoint those folks, or do you have 4 openings, essentially? Because they've been serving since then, which really means they've served a whole nother term, because we're in 2022. They're 4-year terms, right? Or 3-year, excuse me.
For clarification, this is for appeals, right?
Correct, yes.
Because for them to get approval, it's all staff approval, correct?
Generally speaking, that's why they've never met.
That's what I said.
So why, so again, to my question earlier, is it necessary to have it?
What happened is when the Bull Street open form-based code was better, easier term, what do they call it?
Well, it's the PUD, yeah, the PUD,
That's another term.
yeah.
Anyway, for the code, what it is. Instead of having to go through all the boards and commissions, they have to just demonstrate to staff that they've met the code that's in there.
Correct.
And all this does is if they say no.
Right, and so you do by law have to have an appeals board, a BOZA. We just established a separate one for that code because it was a different type of code.
Is the consensus that we just reappoint it and let it run its course till the next available time to try to change the development agreement so that we can put it into one committee?
Or we could just name all the existing BOZA code members to be commissioners on that.
Could be over one, though.
So we need to find two positions that carry it forward.
If they've never met, can't we just, ignore them until 2 years?
They do, before the pandemic, they met once a year just to look at each other. But, it would be good in case something were to happen to have current members.
Krista, the new code that we adopted in August, does not have some form-based, code in it?
No, sir. I mean, it really still only applies to Bull Street.
Krista, before you sit down, can I ask you a question? The land use boards, you know the history of them. Have we always relied on a application for candidates, or have we ever had a verbal interview process through some committee, standing committee?
No, to my knowledge, you all have never done an interview process. I know that's done at the county through a subcommittee so that you can, get a little bit more information about the candidate and potentially set expectations as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, that was a great question. That was one I wanted to follow up on. Interestingly enough, at the state level, nobody applies for anything. The governor on his appointments, the General Assembly, they go out and find who they think are the best candidates.
We don't give license plates.
Yeah, we could give little stickers. But my point is simply as we go through the process, we probably should ask ourselves at some point in time, do we have the ability to nominate people for these, for lack of a better description, or do we have to rely on applications?
Well, we do that informally. We found out that we've got 3 vacancies on BOZA. And so we look around the table and say, all right, we need somebody in District 3. Will said, I'll get somebody in District 3. Daniel said, I'll get somebody in District 4, which will be your responsibility now. And we go out and recruit them and make them do the application.
Well, but
It's
that's-
just a different way to do it.
Well, I mean, that's enlisting somebody to go apply. I mean, it's a little bit different. And I think one of the things that I'm willing to do as a district councilman as we move forward is not necessarily look to pick people based on where they live, but pick people on their ability to do a good job.
Well, we hope, hopefully that is synonymous.
Are we still looking for a historic architecture professional in District 4?
That's my-
There's your charge.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I really do think it's important for us, if we're gonna, to compete going forward, to ensure that we're picking the best people in the city
I agree with you.
for these posts. And that's why, that's why I'd rather not see us restrict them to districts and so forth. That, if you've got an individual that you think would make an outstanding choice for, whether it's the planning commission or the pet walking board, whichever it is.
Yeah.
As a member of council, you make the case for it.
Well, while we're talking about our grievances, one of mine is that the district council members get very concerned about, we gotta have somebody in District 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. But they ignore the fact that Dr. Bustles and I represent the whole city, and so we don't get to pick. We defer to our district comrades.
Again, I would say. Yeah.
I got ADHD. We started with.
Doesn't that mean you like multiple things going on at the same
No,
time?
It means that you will lose me and I will kind of disengage. But I want to go back to, which I thought was the initial discussion, which was applications versus appointments. And are we done with that issue? 'Cause
Well, for me, it was all part kind of the same discussion, but I understand where you come from. My point is, are we restricting ourselves to only, to only be able to vote for people who've applied, or can we, and we open up to where we can nominate? I just think it's a much more modern, more open type process, and I think it's what I'll take a look at. And
And
then
I agree with Howard that that is what we do now. And we do tell them, yeah, go fill out that one sheet of paper because we have to have documentation. I mean, because the application, I don't really consider it an application. But if the issue is whether or not we no longer want to do applications, I think it's crucial that we do applications because I don't know all the people in my district who may
Well,
be
it's
in
my
this.
job if I want to nominate somebody to make sure you've got the qualifications of the person I want to nominate. And again, I would tell you, the state of South Carolina runs that way. It's just different here with applications.
Well,
Still,
we do the same applicational
Hey,
though.
sir,
It's
fellas, it's Women's History something, so I get to talk.
International Women's.
Women's
Yeah,
History.
International-
It sure
International
is.
Women's Day. So I get, they gave me.
I'm sorry,
privilege all day today.
Oh, that's every day.
So no, but I agree, but I do think that, first of all, the process kind of dictates who's qualified too. So it'll kind of narrow it out. Like, for instance, when it says you have to have this particular thing or this particular whatever. But I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that we were not attempting to remove the application process.
I would
'Cause
say.
it sounded like that's
Let
what
me
we
say
were
this,
doing, but I want to
and
make
this is
sure
what
I'm
I've said
clear.
both times. I'm not taking away anybody's ability to ever apply. I
Gotcha.
just don't want it to be a requirement that somebody can only vote for people who have filled out application papers.
And they still gonna have to fill it out even after you
That's
appoint them.
That's fine, that's fine.
But it's
And
just
then,
one page.
and then, I mean, to me, I just think it's handicapped us a bit in the past, to be perfectly honest with you. And then to address now you're bringing up different different things now.
Well, no, but I want to talk about how does it handicap us, because it's one sheet of paper.
I think it's the process that I think what I'm understanding is the process that the pool of applicants is only restricted to the application, and I don't think that's what we're all saying. What you want to have the ability to do is if you got a good candidate, nominate them. Caveat to be would just to make sure that everybody has their CV or whatever, which would be the proper way to do it. I think we're all saying the same thing, we're just saying it differently. So at the end of the day, I think what we're saying here is that you shouldn't restrict candidates because they didn't go fill an application prior to. They should have the ability to nominate from the floor, and I would just put the caveat that, hey, guys, let's just make sure we share the information with everybody.
And I think we still give deference. So for instance, if it says that this is a District 4 appointment, I mean, what I've observed is that we always give deference to the District 4 representative in making that.
I know, and what I'm, and again, speaking as a single member district representative, my focus would be for us to have the very best people serving on boards and commissions, regardless of which district they're in.
Well noted.
You know what I'm saying?
Well noted, but I think that we need diversity as well. And so
Look here,
I think that's why we had a district.
we can achieve, I'll put it to you like this, I think you can achieve a diverse group regardless. Again, I have some concerns, frankly, with our at-large representation too, that we get too caught up in times. Bottom line is, I think if we're gonna be a great city going forward, we have to begin to do things that are in the best interest of the city as a whole. And I think we need to be thinking in terms of that when it comes to these appointments. I mean, yes, I agree with diversity, and if a District 4 person that I may have nominated or may have applied is not the best person for the job, and the council thinks there's someone better, I think we should be putting the best people on these things myself.
The restriction that we've had has been made by the council, hasn't it, actually?
That's right.
Most of the boards and commissions that we appoint don't say that you gotta have District 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's just that the council, since I've been on it, has always said, well, we need somebody from District 4 because
Yes.
they don't have a representative.
That's correct.
That is correct.
So we make our own barriers.
We make our own.
That's right, that's right,
You do.
I'm saying, I think we need to look beyond that.
Now, there needs to be
What'd you
some,
say? I'm keeping my barrier.
can I, may I now?
Yes. Men can talk now. Men can talk now.
I think in relationship to both Howard and Dr. Brussel, when there's an opportunity to nominate someone, I think it would be in our best interest if we are moving in this direction, of course. It would be good to know that, Howard, you've got somebody out there, or you've got somebody out there in either one of the districts, and that conversation ensues itself, so that when we get at the table, we are able to sit on the same sheet of paper. So I agree with that, but it would certainly give some latitude, what Mr. Taylor is saying. But for you two guys, of course, it would certainly be good that we have that conversation, if it's on the outside or if it's in the inside of the district. That conversation is needed, I think.
Yeah, I think my concern is not so much with the application or lack thereof. I think it's, no matter what, people's friends get put onto these committees, because it's natural to choose your friends, and that's fine if they're the best candidate. But my concern has been for the next generation wanting to step up and get involved. And I've had the fortune of talking to Ashley about some of the exciting changes that are coming through, is how it's not as automated of a process to really know where your application is. And I think that with the adoption of Matchboard, hopefully we'll start to get more applicants. I think a lot of people have been jaded to even apply or engage because things may not be up to date on the website because appointments and terms change very quickly. Or, you know, there may have been someone that dropped off, and there's so much manual work that was behind this to keep things updated that we really weren't engaging a large population. So I'm interested to see what this will look like now that we are getting a process that'll remove some of the burden from our staff to be able to hopefully get some good folks in the door. So I think there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance between getting the best candidates, but also not continuing to appoint the same old because we're friends with them. I think it's an exciting time for us to bring in new people. I think it's easy to default to the people that we're comfortable with, but I'd really like for council to think more openly about folks that maybe haven't engaged but are really great and would be great to be working with the city, but maybe for one reason or the other have not been able to get involved on a board or commission.
So wrapping this big package that just went all over the place.
But the paradigms have shifted a little bit based upon what we used to do. And of course, if I'm hearing this correctly,
I think
the paradigms have shifted in terms of, we started out with an application, whether or not we're gonna do an application, or whether or not we're just gonna select the best folk. It would seem to me that while the paradigms have shifted, it would seem to me that an application is still needed, and in addition to that, we will also look at persons in our districts and, of course, persons who are at large to sort of fill in some of those vacancies.
Yes, sir. So if I may say, historically, that's what council has done. Everything is at your discretion. So if they found a really great candidate, even if they didn't exactly fit maybe the exact district, they would choose that individual based on how council decided to vote. So they'd say, I have this person, they don't necessarily fit this, but they'd be great for it. That's what you all have always done. And you've always also had the option of nominating anyone for any committee and just having them fill,
So Ashley, on the application, of course, it says, and it will identify persons outside your.
So the current application lists their district, their name, their address, their age, additional information, their interest. It lets them have they served before, so on and so forth, and they can submit it. But there have been times where council have nominated individuals and they think they're best for it. And as y'all were saying earlier, they still fill out an application, but it's a little bit later because they've been appointed. But it's essentially a piece of record that allows us to track. We keep them on file for 2 years. Say, for instance, someone applied and they weren't selected this come around. We have their application just in case the position opens, and we still consider those existing applications up to 2 years. In addition to whoever maybe council recommends to appoint or new people that have applied. So the pool has always included nominations, applications, any other recommendations, suggestions of council.
What about those persons outside of the city?
So some of the boards, including like say for instance, hospitality tax, they actually include people who are at large. So they're not limited to district. They're more so limited if it's to restaurateur and if they're lodging or, so on and so forth. But a lot of boards have at-large members listed as well.
Follow up on Councilman McDowell's question, and this may be better addressed to Teresa. Didn't I see somewhere that there was a point in time until like 6 or 7 or 8, 10 years ago, whether you could serve on a city board or commission if you lived or worked in the city? And that changed when?
I think in 2018.
Huh?
Most of them hadn't changed.
I mean,
No?
no, Mr. Gregory
It was a
is,
change.
You want to restrict it to people serving.
No, I'm just, historically, there was a point up until, was it 98, 2008, 2016?
I have no idea, Mr. Taylor. I mean, there's been so many
Okay, well, it was in there
iterations
where
of
if
it.
you lived or you worked in the city, you were eligible to serve on a city board or commission.
And just about all of them are still that way.
Not the way I read it now. Huh?
Part of the application, you can,
Yeah, but I thought the way I saw, I think it was like 2016 it changed. It required you
have
to live in the
John
city. to
Gregory
serve.
doesn't live in the city, and he serves on Boza, because he works in the city.
Well, I'm just telling you, you might want to just,
So I believe.
Well, I think you're right, Ashley, because we've had instances.
I think that's fine.
Where persons apply,
They ought to be able to.
they
they ought
work
to
in the
live
city.
I think live, work on
If you
property.
work and invest in the city, you have a voice.
So
Because if that's the case, I mean, let's be realistic, the majority of our fire department doesn't live in the city. They don't have a voice.
I think they're just confirming whether or not you're allowed to either live in the city or work in the city to be eligible.
Yeah.
No
Because
change.
normally what has happened in the past is that those persons who applied worked in the city, used the city address, but lived somewhere else.
So because of that distinction, that's when a former council member asked that we start putting on every committee, whenever we put it in you all's booklet, that it show their work address and their home address. Because at some point, and we can verify, I believe council voted to only do reside instead of work, whereas prior it was work or reside. But because they wanted to get rid of that distinction, former Councilwoman Devine asked, and as well as council asked, that we start including the work address and the home address of every applicant. So that's why when you receive your booklets or you're voting on a citizen appointment, you will see their work address and their home address, and the district or out of district for either.
We've been doing that.
Yes, sir.
So we've confirmed that we're going to keep a combination of application and appointment process. We've also confirmed we're doing a combination of work and primary residence being in city being allowed. I think we're good, Mayor, to move on.
My understanding. Took a little bit, but we got there. So the next one we were on was Board of Zoning Appeals, which is fully staffed at this point and won't have anything until May if we don't reappoint the individual.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the things that we do now that we have all of these books, dates, and everything, that we want to make sure we start the process way in advance so that we have notice that, hey, in 2 months you've got something, because for us to get the best candidate, if we want to nominate, you can't just go find it, because we've been looking for architectural historian for 2 years now.
Yes, sir.
From any district, because
Well-
the two of them didn't want to serve. And that's, and that becomes a question, and to clarify that, that is a requirement of state statute, right? Or is that something that we can change?
You can change that. It's in the ordinance. What it does afford you is it allows for us to be certified as a certified local government, which affords us the ability for grants and other types of
So it's
state
federally
incentives.
tied. All right. So the next one is the Building Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
So you went through the DDRC.
Haven't gotten there yet.
This is another one that Krista provided a memo for you. I think it notes the last time an appeal was filed was 2018. The
So-
staff recommends changing this to simply having 5 members with 3-year terms to be consistent with other board appointments.
I think that's fine. I mean, I guess the question would it make sense, since most of these terms have expired, 7 years ago? I mean, would it make sense to advertise and just get 5 new commissioners in?
Yeah, the only one that was most recent was Ms. Lucenta Ellis. Maybe contacting her, but otherwise it'd be worth advertising, I do believe.
Are
We're
these-
talking about the Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
The
right?
Building Board of Adjustment and Appeals, yeah, they meet rarely, which is good.
And just exactly what do they do?
If there is a question of interpretation of the International Building Code, that is the board who can adjudicate.
Okay. Or if there's if there's a discussion of an interpretation of a Columbia building inspector. Is that where
It's-
you go there, or do you go to Boza?
It's the code, yeah, so it's if you have an interpretation of materials or the application of materials, that's where you can go. With the inspector, you go to the building official.
Go where?
To the building official. If there's a question of what the inspector is requiring, that should be based on the plans that were approved.
Oh, if you got a question on the plans, you go where?
So if during the plan review process, if there is a difference of interpretation of the code, that's where you would go to this Building Board of Adjustment and Appeal.
So if I was building a restaurant, and it was a little bitty restaurant, and the plans examiner in your department said there had to be 2 ADA bathrooms, but there really wasn't but for one, and I wanted to appeal that, where would I go?
So it's not to appeal whether you need to have one. If the code says
Code
you,
says only one's required, but your inspector says 2 are required.
yes, then, well, first you would appeal that to the building official who would, because the plans examiner. But if that is not a matter of interpretation, if it's not required, it's not required. So,
Oh, that wasn't the case. I mean,
yes,
so
sir.
where do you go? Seriously, Boza or here?
You would first go to the building official, and then he could bring it to the Building Board of Adjustment and Appeal. Yes,
It
sir.
comes here.
Yes,
They
sir.
make that decision.
Yes, sir. The building official staffs that.
Mr. Mayor, procedurally, if we were to change this to 5 members, does it have to be sent to administrative subcommittee for confirmation?
I don't think so. I think, but
So if we're if we're having discussion and agreeing on changes to structures of boards and everything, does it carry forward from this point forward, or does it need to be confirmed and?
well, we'll have to put it on the agenda to vote on it.
So in this work session, we're making suggestions to carry forward. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and the bylaws will need to be changed by that group as well.
And that if changes are made, the statutes then are amended?
Our code we can amend, if it's state statute.
We can. Yeah, we can.
This is a city board, so,
yeah.
so we can amend those. And so the recommendation is we go to 5 members.
Yes, having alternates is just a bit odd, so just having 5 members who know that they'll be called up if
And so
necessary.
what I would suggest is that My recommendation to the floor would be is that we move to reconstitute this essentially with new members, advertise it, and while we're doing that, while we're taking applications, nominations, or whatever over the next couple months, for us to go and make the adjustments to the bylaws through our ordinances to reflect that it's gonna be only 5 members
For 3-year terms.
for 3-year terms. Is that,
We required to have this by law.
Through the International Building Code, yes, sir. It provides that safety valve, just like you were saying.
what I think, what everybody's discovering is one of those boards nobody really knew about and didn't know that they had an option to go to when there was a question. So I think by having a new
No,
slate
I
of
understand, I
folks.
understand what it is. My question was if it wasn't required by law, I mean, could we just not,
Cutting them down, I get it.
empower the staff to be the appeal, versus.
We can look into that,
It's
certainly.
versus having to take it through a commission. I mean, the problem is, and I've personally had this issue, so I mean, I'm
I
not
hear you.
winging it here, where, it just, you get stalled into the 5 and 6 week process when most of the time this is, again, the code stands on its own. The opinion of the building and the plans viewer may not. And again, lots of times I would prefer that our first line of appeal be to senior staff level versus having to stall somebody out 6 weeks.
Right. We'll look into it. I believe it
Okay.
is a requirement of the international code, but if it's not, we would love not to have
Alright.
another board to staff.
So you're
Make sure we're clear, we're going to confirm that it's required. If
Yes,
it's
sir.
not required with the new updated code, then we'll get rid of the board and make it a staff appeal.
We'll examine
Yeah.
the prospect of making it a staff appeal.
Sounds good.
Right.
And Mayor, just for my clarification, for the form-based codes, you're going to reappoint just 2 members, you said? The one that was before this one?
For the Bull Street.
Bull Street.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, I don't want to go backwards, but why couldn't the Bull Street Commission just serve as that appeal deal?
I don't know. Can somebody?
You know what I'm
That's
saying?
a good question. You already have the Bull Street Commission. Is that
They are,
possible?
so in your ordinance, they are established 2 different boards, building the regular BOZA and then this BOZA form-based codes. And the form-based codes, when explicitly relates to the PUD that's established, I think you could merge them. We would just need to do a text amendment,
Would you just look at that and make a recommendation to us?
certainly.
For the PUD that is already established, you will go back and look at whether or not that fits into that, Mr. What?
No, so we're locked in with regard to the PUD and the development agreement, so that cannot change at this time without opening that development agreement. So we would be looking at the regular Board of Zoning Appeals and whether that's possible.
Next is the DDRC. Currently, there are 3 vacancies on there, one with architectural historian, which we have struggled to find. We have a lawyer and a community representative. Based on this, we need 3 members at this point.
Mr. May I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Probably more of a procedural question to you. When the persons are vetted for DDRC, tell me a little bit about what they do.
Ed, you need to talk in the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The clerk's over here
Can you hear me?
snapping my fingers with her ruler.
Can you hear me now? All right. Krista, one of the things that I'm getting, especially for those persons who have been vetted and nominated for DDRC, that training process, I mean, I don't know too much about it, but I've heard that it was very, for lack of a better word, difficult for some folk. Is that something that we will continue to use for vetting purposes?
Yes, state law has a mandatory 6-hour
It's a
training requirement for all land use boards and staff.
It's a computer deal, right?
Yes, sir.
6 hours?
6 hours required by state law.
And I guess that's the thing that I raise, is that persons who have vetted and been nominated for DDRC, they will need to know up front.
You need to tell them
Six-
before they apply.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just DDRC, it's any land use board. It's Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well, I was particularly interested in DDRC
Yes, sir.
because that's the issue that was brought to me.
Now, it's not 6 hours all at once. It used to be a mandatory 3-hour block, so they have allowed it to be broken up, but it is mandatory, yes, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
So we need to fill these spots. So between advertising and everybody looking for the right candidates, you know, we got one that's created more challenges than others.
So they're on this list too, Mayor, so we can use it later.
Yes, ma'am. Next is the Planning Commission, which we have 2 positions open. One is a vacancy and one is Dr. Mandela, who's been serving since her term expired. And she had served multiple times, so she's tapped out on.
Well, this is her second appointment, so she served a number of years ago, which is why it's showing that. So she was actually appointed again.
This would be her third in this realm from our documentation that we were given earlier. So this will be her, she's already served 2 terms in this current, she served 2 terms before, tapped out, left, came back, now served 2, so
So
she's,
our documentation, she's served 1-year, 3-year term for this particular time. She did serve multiple last time, I believe, but she has served multiple terms.
yep. No, because when we got our sheet before, it showed where it said this was the second round. She'd basically been there for close to 12 years, off and on, which taps her out, so we'll have to replace her as well. So that's another one that needs to be advertised and people need to be thinking about. And then the next is, we get to the next tab, which is the external boards and commissions, which you can see we have 31. Now, obviously, some of these are key. I know that some of them should be, maybe would be set for a time period. Most of them are ones where we appoint citizens to or we're currently serving on.
This sheet that I'm looking at still needs to be updated.
It was just in here as a reference point when we brought you, these are the ones that you all had to be appointed
We've already
to.
done some of these.
You have, I just put everything in here that you've ever in life looked at with these boards and commissions. But these are just the ones where council members needed to appoint themselves to. And you've done that.
So these external boards and commissions, the external boards and commissions list, some of these are ones that, of course, are existing organizations. Others were created by previous city councils, to be community-based. Okay.
And some are by state
We've already done
code.
work on that.
Why would the accommodation tax be external?
Over to what?
The Accommodation Tax Advisory Committee, I would say that's internal.
I mean, I guess you could say that about BPAC, Mr. Duval. You could say that about CPAC. You could say that about any number. I mean, I think what happens is you all or councils over the years have established things and they morph into these ongoing boards or committees or commissions versus something that is truly an external organization. A lot of these have ties to the city, or like Adventure or the Museum of Art. There's some type of arm's length arrangement with the city, financially maybe, or through building maintenance reasons. So I think with any of these, you can make some case for what category it might fall under. We just grouped all of these here. I think the difference in what I'm hearing you say about the standing and the other task forces that you just established is that you're putting a sunset date on many of those new ones. And so perhaps some of these never had sunset dates applied and they just have lingered on and continued over the years. We've tried to do our best. Ashley, Erica, and myself doing some research on each to try to get as much of the information with the bylaws, how they were established, that sort of thing that's in the binder for you. But sometimes we weren't able to get clear answers, to be honest. For example, with transitions, which you serve on that, we have a document that shows that Ms. Devine had been serving and you. But we don't see in the bylaws where it says that 2 council members would be appointed. So maybe that just had been occurring. I don't know. But you'll see that we listed her because she had on some documents that showed that she was participating. So we just put it as a vacancy to see if one of you want to do that, because that was probably we tried to already deal with all of the ones where council appointments needed to be made. But just over the past few days, that was brought to my attention.
In my opinion, the accommodation tax advisory, I'm gonna call out the ones that I think are internal. I think the accommodations tax advisory, the BPAC, bicycle pedestrian, the Citizens Advisory for CPD, Climate Protection Committee, Telemetry and Appearance Commission, Election Commission, Food Policy, Hospitality Tax Advisory, Parks and Recreation Foundation, Property Maintenance Board of Adjustment and Appeals, and the South Carolina Memorial Park Commission are all internal.
Whether they're internal or external, you appoint citizens to them. So, at the end of the day, I think we were referring to it as the ones that you have to make citizen appointments to.
But I do agree with Howard, for the ones that solely exist for us, like to help us solely, I do feel that that's more of an internal, because I also noted the Citizens Advisory Committee for Community Development that supports the Community Development Department. CRLF solely exists to support OBO. So I don't really see those as external boards. I think we kind of appoint them just like we appoint the land use. They just aren't considered land use.
I think that's true. Land use, of course, is determined by state law on some level. These are things that over the years, again, just like some of these other ones that you've, where you all put them, it's fine with me. Wherever you all want us to put them and whatever you want us to call them is fine. Just let us know.
So what we have in the memo that y'all gave us, we've got current vacancies that we need to address. Then we have upcoming vacancies that come out all the way through the end of this fiscal year for us. So the question becomes, some of these have folks that are eligible for reappointment. So the question is do we want to begin the process of going ahead and advertising and reaching out to find the best candidates for these positions? Because right now, in the current vacancies that are available, You've got accommodations that needs 3, and those 2 have to be lodging, 1 has to be hospitality. You've got, looks like 2 positions open, 1 eligible for, on the BPAC. Zoning appeals, as we discussed earlier, has, for the form base has 2 vacancies, but we're gonna hold that until we find out if that can be rolled in. The appeals has basically 6 vacancies, as we've seen. So that needs to be addressed. Community development has 1 vacancy. Climate protection has 2 none. Housing authority, which is a big one, folks, that we have not only a commissioner that needs to be appointed as soon as that we can find the right candidate, but we're also gonna have one this fall in September that is vacant as well, so we need to be prepared for that. And those are 2 very critical appointments. You got 4 on tree and appearance, repairs advisory committee, revolving loan has to be an attorney in a small business. The Ddrc, as we just discussed, attorney, architectural historian, and District 2 representative. If we're going by district or we're trying to find the right person, either one, we still need 3 people there. Relations Council, we have 3. Hospitality, there are 4 vacancy. 1 has to be a restaurateur, and then there's 3 at large. This is probably, another critical. And then the Airport Commission, we have a vacancy there as well, and then the Planning Commission's 1. So these are ones that we need to work on now, and then obviously come April, we have multiple again.
We have 4 out on hospitality committee, and that committee has got a report in June.
So I think the ones that are current vacancies that we need to make sure we're advertising or recruiting for and nominations brought to the floor.
I guess my question is, and I may need to be reminded of how we advertise, and then if there is an easy way for us to help. I'm not real technology savvy despite being the chair of the technology committee, but if it's in a format that I can easily send out to folks, that would be great. But when we say advertising, do we put it on the website, or what are we doing?
It's actually advertised on the City of Columbia website via press release from PR. We also additionally send it out to a list of outside agencies with the press release, so it goes beyond the city website to outside networks, say for instance, different, basically leadership organizations, so on and so forth. And then now we have the extension of Matchboard, which will expand it even further. Yes.
Can I ask one question real quick? Ms. Wilson, would you go ahead and, like I say, and draft a memo that has all these on it that you could send to us, that we could forward out, to people who we think may be interested in this? It has a little more directions on how you apply, what's required, and the whole shooting match.
Jazz up this thing.
See, Howard's already picking out people. I want to find the best people.
I would always find the best person.
I was just kind of thinking of, if it's on the website, then I can just send that link, but,
I'm gonna send it to everybody, because there's a lot of positions here. And some of these, we really need to focus on as a council. Housing authority, airport commission, hospitality and tax, which they're meeting before long. I mean, I'll be honest with y'all, we're today's the 8th. I mean, we really need to try to push and generate this and try to have something that we could get in on the first meeting in April, if not the second at the latest, to get these filled.
And I would just highlight on what Dr. Bustle said. Rather than just sending these to our friends, look for people that you've met that could excel in these boards and commissions. And get this in front of them and either ask them to apply or ask for their resume so you can send it in. I mean, there's a lot of talent in this town that I don't know if they ever see these opportunities or not.
So next we have just a little bit about the appointment process and enhancements and the introduction of Matchboard. Matchboard is essentially a streamlined online application that provides a single point of entry for applicants and management of application process. It gives so basically a comprehensive review is underway of the boards and commissions, appointments, and the membership term limits as well. We can discuss that. But Matchboard essentially is an online interface that allows citizens to create a profile and apply. When they create their profile, they can list their interests, their name, their information, they can upload their resume, and not only can they apply for boards that they're interested in, but Matchboard also provides recommendations that for additional boards that they could potentially serve on. So they aren't limited to the ones that they can think of. Matchboard takes all the information compiled and provides recommendations as well. And then there's also an easy side of the interface for us, and then also for council to be able to view information about each candidate. So it makes the whole entire process easier.
Actually, let me ask you to that point. In the past, when candidates have been brought forward to, I lost my train of thought because of Howard. No, I'm just kidding. There was a staff recommendation for certain individuals. Can you speak to what is that process? What went into that for those recommendations to come forward?
So all the applications were received, and then from there, the staff liaison or the board would review those applications and provide a list of recommendations for who they thought would best fit the board based on what the board requirements were. But however, council was provided with all the applications that were received in addition to the list of recommendations. So you all received every application and none were eliminated. And then from there, you also received the list of staff. So those people essentially can speak to the needs of the board, what the requirements are, and who they think would be the best fit. So that was the process. And then we would give that to council in memo form, maybe a letter from the board chair saying, these are our recommendations. And you all would see those in addition to the other applications.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think you all have already covered many of your recommendations to enhance the process, some things you would like to keep or tweak. The notes I have is possibly an interview process for some of the applicants.
I did not say that out loud.
Maybe. Also keeping the ability to use the application process, but certainly encouraging nominations. And also opening up to outside the districts, necessarily just finding the best qualified candidates. And they can either work or reside in the city of Columbia. If there are any additional recommendations, we would certainly like to hear them. And again, as Ashley stated, we're looking forward to utilizing the Matchboard as soon as it can be fully implemented. And making sure too that there's alignment with your priorities, as well as if you determine, because there are so many here and they all serve good purposes. But again, from doing this exercise, we know that some of those purposes sometimes need to be updated, or maybe you fulfill a purpose as you're doing with some of the newly established, and you're gonna let those sunset appropriately. So as you take more time to look through your book, if you have questions about any of these, we can try to continue to do the research for you.
This is very helpful to have this, and as we post moving forward, I think, as we talk about it, I think we let people know well in advance and continue. Now that we have kind of a working list, I'm hoping that down the road, we can also go through these external lists too, and make sure all of these are relevant to today, because, between this, we got, I don't know how many are here total, 50-plus boards and commissions? And committees. So as we move forward, where there are opportunities to merge groups together or other things, we can think about, let's take this as the first step, and if we can get, a good-looking memo that spells it out, what the process is, what's available, that all of council can not only send out to to the folks that may have interest. I know I've got a long list of folks who want to try to participate, so I'm gonna encourage them to take part in this process, obviously. There's a lot of talent, as we've all acknowledged, so we need to make sure we get out of the comfort zone and make sure we're continuing to invite and encourage people to be part of the process. Ms. Herbert?
I just had a question that came out of the session we did with Leadership Columbia today, and folks were asking, did we have certain task force that we haven't quite thought of? Do we have a process for when citizens are wondering, citizens feel like we need a task force on certain issues? And if y'all have any thoughts on how that should be handled. I won't get into the topics because then that may change the conversation. But I think it's a legitimate question when citizens say, do you all have a task force on this issue or that issue?
Are the topics of this task force not covered by any of these boards or commissions?
Not, well,
My response would be,
it wouldn't be a direct. You would have to like try and fit it, and then I think it would throw your committee off. A particular, it would take you in a different direction.
Mr. Mayor, don't we have the ability for any citizen to come make public remarks at council meetings?
Every meeting.
And that's what I would just say. If somebody wants a task force, thinks we ought to be studying something, they ought to come to the council meeting and call for the task force.
The way that has been handled in the recent years that I've been on council is that an issue comes up, affordable housing, and we put together a small group to study it, and it grows into a task force. So that's one example. The ACE committee would be another. We had a problem come up to council, and a committee was formed to study, and it resulted in the formation of an advisory commission on equality. So I think this sort of spontaneous thing, but Joe's suggestion of asking them to come verbalize what they want, and then the council can decide collectively whether or not we think that needs to create some sort of ad hoc group, which may turn into another permanent group.
I agree, I like it. I just always like to be able to give citizens some kind of answer for what they're trying to do, and I think that's a good option. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, I got one last question. We have a staff members assigned to every one of these councils, right? Do we have any kind of attendance requirement? I mean, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings or whatever, you're out.
We do.
We do?
That's actually the attendance requirement. That's actually it, the 3 consecutive, you can't miss 3 consecutive, I believe. It's like 2 consecutive, or I believe it's 3. It's 3. You can't miss 3
Is
consecutive
that carried
meetings.
forward for external?
Yes, sir, and they send us their attendance list.
I mean, is that what you're at? Because you said a staff
That's right, she
appointed.
answered my question perfectly. I just want to make sure it was somebody, the staff, that if we had somebody that wasn't, never came to a commission meeting, we ought to take them off. And you could make it automatic if you didn't want to have to vote on it and put somebody in its place. I mean, I don't know if everybody comes to all the Ddrc meetings or planning commission, but these things are important. I mean,
And that information, Councilman, would also be included when they provide recommendations too. We've asked them to let us know.
perfect.
That's 3 unexcused.
3 consecutive, yes, sir.
It means, Ed, you have to have a doctor's excuse.
No call, no show.
Mom and dad in
Yeah,
there.
right. Speaking to Mr. Brennan's question, though, the external boards, and my definition of external, they have their own requirements. So we set the requirement of 3 for our boards, but some of these things are not our boards, but
Well, I would tell you that if we appoint somebody and they don't show up to meetings, then we need to
We're gonna
take
take
them
'em off
off,
the meeting.
because that's not the purpose of that. We're not
But the-
appointing people so they can have the board seat.
it's usually one of us.
So you're making that all-inclusive.
Like my mama said, we put you in this world, we'll take you out of this world.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
It's good to know that we have multiple opportunities for everyone in the city of Columbia to be involved.
So our next item is the American Rescue Plan Act funding. Missy Kaufman, our Budget and Program Management and Grants Director, and I and Jeff will assist with this item. The main purpose, of course, is to finally bring a recommendation to you on a program for the allocation that we've received as a city of $27,178,358. And of course, this is another item where it's carrying over from a previously seated council to the newly seated council. And so the list and the spreadsheet that I've provided to you has certainly changed. When we first started looking at this, when the funds first came down from the federal government, obviously the council just began initial look. They asked for any and every type of possible eligible use. And of course, the compliance regulations have evolved over time. We feel like we're at a point now where those regulations and guidelines are probably about as close as we're gonna get to having, and we try to obviously stay in line with that, with the eligible uses that we're putting before you, but also I tried to think about it from the perspective of things that I've heard from the council that are of interest to you, particularly most urgently, some of the items that you've been describing of late that have to do with public safety in particular. So what we'll do is take you through a few slides and then really seeking your endorsement, suggestions for the eligible uses as we've outlined them here.
Real quick, we got how many years to spend this money?
4, thereabouts, but 3. We can designate it over the course of the 3 or 4 years.
And procedurally, the discussion today, when you said endorse, does that mean that then we're formally approving, or does it go to a vote when we go into the budget process?
So we're gonna give you directions on that. Obviously, we're in the current fiscal year 21-22 budget, and so you will see some items here out the gate that we feel we can go ahead and utilize the funding for those things. And if you so want to consider, Dr. Bustles, we would have to bring that to you at one of your next council meetings on the agenda for your possible approval only for FY 21-22. And then the idea would be for the items as listed, if you choose to keep them as we have them, or if you want to tweak some things as part of the budget process we're in for 22-23, we would incorporate those items as part of your budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Kaufman, if you want to go through some of the slides, and then we'll reserve questions to the end so that we can go through it and talk about the spreadsheet and eligibility and other things, and just kind of, that way you can just go through the overview quickly and some of the other points, and then we'll take questions from there,
Yes,
if that
yes.
works.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I really was not
trying
going to
anyway.
spend any time on the primer sessions other than just information for you. You do have a copy of this presentation before you, so you can, well, read it at your leisure, of course. It is a very much summarized of the entire program. So there's a lot more information if you do want some additional information later on. As Ms. Wilson mentioned, the city received about $27 million. We received those funds over what's called 2 tranches, which means, which is the federal use of the terms, which basically means they've upfront paid us $13 million last June, and then we will receive the second tranche, or the second half of those funds, anytime after this coming June. There's no date set in certain. And we have started reporting. We are required to do quarterly reporting of these funds. There are we're showing 5 categories, but technically there's 4 categories of eligible uses. Those 4 categories are fairly broad when you look at subcategories and distinguishing lines between them. Basically, they're addressing public health and economic challenges caused from the pandemic. As mentioned, the update that I just mentioned, the 27 million, we have our half. The other direct funds, I'm only mentioning them here because these are the only 2 sources of direct funds that the city's received from the American Rescue Plan Act so far, and that would be the city's direct ARP allocation and, of course, the home ARP allocations from HUD, CDBG, which Ms. Saeed will be discussing with you momentarily. We did want to establish some goals or parameters around the recommendations from which we make to you based on conversations with the prior city council and of course, guidance that we're seeing from Treasury and from input we see from other communities around the country in terms of how they're approaching the use of these funds. We want to focus and remind ourselves that these are one-time funds. We are using these funds to try to address immediate needs. We want to, of course, create sustainable solutions. We want to make sure that we're compliant and we are submitting the reports as required, and we want to be able to achieve long-term benefits with these funds. So with that, we'll go straight into the recommendations or the proposed plan allocations. And as Ms. Wilson mentioned, there have been some funds already contemplated in the current fiscal year. This has been adjusted slightly so far. So the spreadsheet you have before you, and this on the screen, the top portion represents items that are either allocated currently in the budget or they are funds that have actually been spent. Then the bottom portion,
Can we confirm what, because I just want to make sure, my understanding from a confirmed spent, the only thing that's been spent is the premium pay and the vaccine incentive.
those are the only dollars we have actually expended, that's correct. The others have just been allocated via our budget process, and actually we've adjusted those so they reflect a different amount than what's in the budget today, but we've made some adjustments based on where we are with revenue projections, since the allocations are basically helping us to address potential revenue shortfalls.
And you put the $500,000 into hospitality.
So originally that was in the budget this year is 1.7 million. The current hospitality tax budget included allocation of 1.7 million from ARP. Based on where we are with revenue projections for the hospitality tax fund, we have adjusted that down to $500,000 to see if that gives us a cushion, and we'll be able to adjust that even more once we get to the fiscal year.
And I think that's part of what we want to talk about, because hospitality fund is what's collected. It's not a replacement. And, I think we're going to differ. I think that's one of those discussions we're going to have as a group here as we move forward.
Sure. So of course, we have, at this point, $500,000, mostly just as a cushion to help us see how we get through the rest of the fiscal year so that we can stay within budget with what funds have been allocated from the hospitality tax fund. Any other questions about?
What's the deal with the parking side?
Parking is also based on the same discussions based on the potential loss of revenue since the pandemic on our parking fund.
But I mean, why would you put that money back in the parking fund? Is it a loan covenant?
So we don't end the fund in a deficit, so the fund doesn't end in a deficit. The parking fund.
And what's it supposed to be? I'm gonna need more details on that before we go putting money back into parking lot.
Okay. Sure.
I think what she's saying is, so at the beginning of the year, we budget expense, let me finish, because let me finish. And so, if we don't get the anticipated revenue, then there will be a deficit, and it's gonna be in red. I'm remembering my budget days. I didn't want to be in the red, so it has to come from somewhere. And I think that's what she's saying.
I just like more details on that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, we make sure we're not in red. Make sure we're not in the red in that department.
In that fund. And of course, parking fund has taken some of the majority of the hits with regards to revenue as a result from the pandemic.
And the fund itself The revenue, so maybe I'll ask it this way. The revenues that are generated from our parking services, does that go towards our general fund?
No, it goes in the parking fund. It's an enterprise fund and it's its own fund. So parking revenues support parking operations. Much like water and sewer supports water and sewer operations. It is its own fund. And there are bond covenants from our parking proceeds. Absolutely.
One thing to clarify, so there's a recommended target of 5% for administration. Is that something that, that number is something that we have to have, or I know it's allotted to us. The question, just because this is funding that we could use at different places, if it's services we're already doing, then we ought to use it where we can. If we could just clarify that as well.
So, I'm sorry, we probably should have started with that, right, Ms.
That's
Nichols?
true,
At
yes.
the very top, the administration, it's just a recommendation of 5%. I know many of you have asked me the question about as various funding opportunities come down that are also many being funded from the federal government because of the pandemic and American Rescue Plan funds through agencies. How are we gonna be prepared and ready to apply? We also have to be compliant with these funds. And so we just came up with a 5% number that hopefully we could use for grant writers, compliance folks, et cetera, potentially. Again, you're right, Mayor, it may be that, you know, as we're going through our budget process, if through the general fund, we can cover that and not have to use it from here. But our recommendation is that you do set aside some amount because we are gonna have to administer these funds appropriately.
And I think we offset what we have to administer, but I don't want to just set, I would prefer that we didn't just set an arbitrary number when we could possibly use that to make a difference somewhere else in some of the things that are priorities.
Correct. 5% was based on just sort of a standard, and then we also know, even though these funds are not directed by HUD or guidelines by HUD, 5% is standard in HUD-related grants, so 5% administration. Of course, that number is adjustable based upon what we do see. And then I think, and Mr. Palin's pointed out as well, with regards to hospitality tax, that's correct. Any funds we use, whether it's in the parking fund or the hospitality tax fund, none of these funds would be used to help us bank a surplus. That's actually not eligible. So we would only utilize the funds that would be deemed in terms of keeping us within budget to meet our obligations and commitments. Nothing above and beyond that.
So when you get down to which you're going to get us some more detail on where we really are with parking and everything,
Yes.
so we understand that. Obviously, I know it's ineligible, so is crime and other things. So I want to make sure that we're addressing those. You know, one of the questions I had is COVID-related expenses for the PP. Do we know what we've spent to date and how that plays into what you're looking for the future? I wanted to see if we could just get some more information under that, just understanding what we're preparing for.
So to date, we've already spent over $400,000 in regards to, and the majority of that cost is going to be cleaning and COVID testing, especially after the surge from this last winter. But cleaning and preparing offices, if you recall, you know, since goes from July 1, when we reopened offices July 6, so obviously a lot of cleaning, purchases of PPE and other items to be able to prepare offices. So this was allowed to cover the cost of those expenses. And then the $200,000 is just thinking through the start of this budget year, that would be this coming July. Of course, these would be adjusted based on what our actuals versus, you know, forecast.
And then as we moved into the categories, especially around public safety, obviously the pathway units we all endorsed last week, and we're anticipating on moving that, and you've kind of budgeted out and spread that out there. I know that you've got initiatives to address crime and gun violence. At one time we had, and then obviously we have the demolition that we've talked about of trying to help in the neighborhoods and take away those restrictions by using these funds versus other funds. The second gear of bunker gear, look, this is probably one of the most critical items. I'm glad to see it there. And obviously, we talked about the clean rooms. I'm hoping that the county's gonna match these as well for their portion. That they had, it felt like they had committed to at our last meeting, but, we need to confirm that. I did want to just ask out of curiosity, one time we had some camera money in here. Is that from a priority? Are we switching that because these are things that will have more immediate effect on our community?
Yes, sir, they will, but again, Chief Holbrook and Chief Jenkins have given us lots of information, that we can use to shift if we need to. I mean, obviously initiatives that address crime and gun violence, the cameras are a part of that. But as, you know, we're going into their regular budget cycle and some of the things that we're gonna be looking to do, I think we're gonna be fine as far as the cameras are concerned. What you wanna add to that, Missy?
Cameras and lights.
No, they're in the general fund. I said, I believe what I just heard Ms. Wilson say is that the cameras will be part of the general fund budget.
Covered by the 977.
Yeah, I guess I had I appreciate the description up there about the community-based violence intervention programs. Are there staff suggestions as to what those might be? Have we explored? I would be interested to learn a little bit more about how we got to the 2.273 number there.
So we have a breakdown of what, I mean, how, and yes, we can absolutely tell you where the number comes from because the chief works with Missy and Jeff and myself to give us firm numbers on what certain programs might cost. So do you have that with you today, or do you want to?
I do, well, we can talk at least at high level. Some of it is based on from Chief Holbrook and the police department related specifically, you're referring to the CBD initiatives addressing crime and gun violence.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that Ms. Wilson has mentioned with regards to like cameras, some additional surveillance type cameras that are in.
So is this like Shot Spotter, or is this like?
Not shot spotter, but some of the rapid DNA, that would be equipment and some reoccurring cost. License plate readers that would go on, I believe 24 vehicles is what we're quoting for at this point. A community-based programming that focuses on crime and gun violence. That's a program to be named. Chief is working with. It's a national program. As well as some of the other ones. Some of the other programs was the Alistar equipment, which I mentioned, the security cameras. Those are in specific areas.
This was lighting included in that?
Like neighborhood lighting? No,
I mean, it would certainly be good to have cameras fine, but gee whiz, we need lights. Are lights included?
That's probably gonna be something you see, Reverend McDowell, when we bring you the general fund budget.
Well, let me just address that, Mr. McDowell, too, because, you know, as Dr. Bustles asked for the details on the initiatives, I would tell you the same thing down in neighborhood and community investments. I mean, I'd like to see the details on what you're thinking there before a final decision's made, because,
certainly.
you know, a couple of things, you know, I'd like to just have a chance to better learn how we're using our existing housing stability, attainability, and, you know, how we're using the existing stuff that we've got to see if we need to add that or add more or less. I think as part of our neighborhood redevelopment, Mr. McDowell, I think one of the things that we need to really look at is better lighting, Henry, in our parks, you know, and converting things like that to LED and stuff like that and lighting our neighborhoods. I think what we did last week is a phenomenal thing. I don't think this is necessarily our responsibility, but we have an enormous problem with the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. And what we're gonna, you know, somehow, somewhere where it's the county or us participating, something's gotta be addressed on that jail. I mean,
Got all the details on the finances that he asked for all the time.
well, my point is, let me tell you something. We're getting ready to be dealing with a real issue, I think. I haven't talked to the chief, but when the bad guys are beating our policemen back in town because they're 70% understaffed, somebody's got to address that. And I don't know whether we, you know, as we look at what our deal may be going forward, some of these funds could be very much a part of that. And again, I want to get a better understanding on what commercial retention and redevelopment programs are before we
That
vote.
is the actual program that's administered by the Office of Business Opportunities. A lot of times it's funded through CDBG dollars, but they usually use most, if not all of that. And so that's, you know, doing the facades for the small businesses or like if a small business wants to get a grant.
I understand. I'd like to see what our success rate's been on our grants. I'm a new guy. I'd like to see what our success rates have been on our grants. I'd like to see, you know, how we've been putting in the facades. I mean, I hope it's all wonderful and proves the fact that more investment yields greater results.
It does.
But I'm a seeing is believing kind of guy.
Yeah, look, it does. But kind of, so I did have a question about the community-based violence intervention programs. Is this something that we're thinking about doing internally or partnering with someone, or are we still feeling that out?
It would be a partnered program with a national organization.
Okay.
I think the hesitancy is to name that group once we have a contract that we would bring forward.
Okay. And then I want to make sure that council understands the intent of the proposed budget outline, because I would not want you all working extensively on anything that we have no intent on funding. And so I just want to make sure I'm clear and I'm understanding that y'all are asking for general guidance on how you all think the best priorities are. Because I know that we want details, but what I'm saying is don't spend 3 weeks. I don't want to put folks through spending 3 weeks to put something together just for council to say, well, no, that's not really what we want to do. Yeah, so I think, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on what the expectation or what the ask is, because I want to make sure that we're not being too cumbersome and not getting, we have to be effective. I just want to make sure we're effective. And so whatever work y'all are working on, I want it to end up with some results. So, and I hope y'all understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They need some guidance so that they know that, yes, this is an interest area before you put in a whole bunch of work to something.
My question around crime and gun violence was an interest area of mine, to be able to also share that with constituents, so that I have a clear understanding of here are the evidence-based things that we are doing. And Chief and I have had a conversation already. But I hear you, Tina, in that it's important for us to get the kind of sub-lines of maybe how this might be broken down a little bit more. But I'm not expecting any sort of in-depth anything yet, except for some of those like bullet points of what this may entail, until some of these kind of like the national partnerships and things are worked out. And I'm just speaking to the crime and gun violence. There may be different expectations for other council members.
Again, I think I said at the beginning, the reasons that you see these particular categories and the projects as they are listed is a combination of very specific directives, quite honestly, from the previously seated council and what I've heard this seated council say so far. So you have specifically said, go fund the Pathways program, right?
Yeah.
So it's on here.
That's correct.
You have specifically said, some of you, but again, until I get you all together, I'm ready to tackle whatever demolitions that David can do tomorrow. And the only reason he isn't doing them is he doesn't have the money. Not through CDBG, because with CDBG, he's hamstrung because he has to go get an environmental. With these monies, he does not. So that's why that's on here. The previous council said, fund the gear, the second set of bumper gear.
Just getting ready to get.
Okay, so it's on here. Fund some station livability issues, and we just picked, $500,000, quite frankly, over the next 3 years is certainly not gonna do everything, but it's a start. Again, it's meant to give you a guide, and to your point, Dr. Bustles, we can give you as much detail as you want. To your point, Ms. Herbert, if we're clearly not even in the ballpark with this stuff on here, please let us know, and we will go in a different direction.
Madam City Manager, I think you're right on target. I'm gonna beat my drum again. And I know you know,
Speak in the
I think
mic.
you know what that drum is.
Speak in the mic, please.
I'm sorry. Give us a lavalier mic so I can roll back in this chair. I think it is essentially important, as I've said on numerous occasions, and I think our mayor can sort of bear me up on this, fire equipment for our firefighters. It's on here. I see it. Being on paper is something. Doing it is something else. Our guys are, all that CPD is doing, all that CFD is doing, our firefighters, when they are jeopardizing their life every day. Our officers are jeopardizing their lives every day. Carcinogen, cancer, carcinogens, and we've got here extractors, and we've got here new gear. Let's make this happen, folks. Too many of our firefighters are getting sick, and it's because of the carcinogens that are in their uniforms when they get through with a fire. So we need to make sure that not only are we putting it on paper, we need to make sure, and I'm glad the city manager brought that up. I want to make sure that those guys are protected. We've talked about it numerous times, so let's put our money where our mouth is. Thank you, ma'am.
Missy, can you talk to us about city projects and amenities, the subcategory of rolling stock and capital equipment? Is general, is that public safety driven for recruitment retention purposes? What do we, that's a pretty significant number there.
It is. So as you may recall, we included in the annual budget $9 million of, or actually it's been $7 million of fleet replacement programs. This year, we did go up to 9 million, because there was a year during the pandemic, we suspended that. So as we have also added more fleet to our program, the need to increase the amount of vehicles we replace every year has grown. So the purpose of this was to help us catch up our replacement program. We would probably specifically focus these on public safety to meet the requirements of the, although public safety is not a specific eligible expense. However, there are a lot of caveats or a lot of subcategories that allow for use for public safety and first responders. At any rate, revenue, or loss of revenue is another option. But in this case, so this would help us to supplement our existing, and I hate to use that word with referring to grant dollars, but in this case, it would be increasing the ability of our replacement program beyond what we are able to budget now.
But still meet some of
Oh,
Chief
absolutely.
Holbrook's goals, take-home cars, you know, we see those big numbers that roll through the agenda for Columbia Water, so I'd like to.
Right. In this case, it would be just general fund activity.
Okay.
It would be our police and fire, public works, so our garbage trucks, our traffic, utility traffic, the bucket trucks, if you will, parks, recreation vehicles, but primarily police and fire. One fire truck.
Right.
One fire truck and a pumper would take this out.
Yeah. I think the fire truck producers are gonna have a long lead time with all the orders that are gonna be coming in.
Right, and so, and since we had suspended some of that program during the pandemic, so this will help us, we were already falling some behind, so this will help us catch up, and be able to utilize these funds over a couple of years.
Perfect, thank you.
I think if it would be helpful, for us, because of understanding the parking fund and hospitality, which I don't think, I'm just gonna be front, I don't believe that hospitality money should come out of here. That's $500,000 that can be put somewhere else where we have a one-time capital need. Hospitality tax has always been built off of what's collected, and that's what's collected, that's what we distribute, and that's just the way it is. I do think the numbers are better than they were.
Yes.
But I don't think I don't know about the parking fund, and I think that's something that we need to have a discussion about to show us where that is. Because if it's a requirement because of bonding or anything like that, then we have to address that. If it's not, then we don't need to address it, you know? I mean, it is what it is. We suffered like other businesses, that there are other opportunities for us to do this. I know that we voted on the pathway units, and I'm thankful to see that. We're not under a time constraint to push any of this, so I think if we can massage, just make sure we're getting information and start picking them off one by one. I mean, you know, obviously we can't make a decision in here today, but I'm hoping on the next agendas, we can start picking off, you know, by, you know, if it's the second set of bunker gear, making sure that what we're putting in for initiatives for both the crime and the gun violence are, you know, we're all on board. We understand what we're doing, because it's going to be very important for us to to explain that to the public as well. So I think if we can get some more detail on what we're thinking on each one of these, we can start moving this forward. I think we're started to head down the right path, but let's make sure that we're all on accord of what we're talking about. I know these are general headings in here, obviously, because it is, but I think the detail behind it will get everybody more comfortable as we move forward. And obviously, we don't even know, at this point, we might not get the next tranche of money in July. It may be September, it may be November. So we're having to look at really what we can, you know, what we can move forward today with what we have. And, you know, as far as I can tell, we've spent about 5.2 million at this point. Is that roughly out of 13? So that'll give us something. So maybe what we ought to do is go back and look at that from a budgetary standpoint as we're talking about each one of these, because I don't want to commit any dollars until we actually know we're getting the second dollars.
So do you not want us to bring back to one of your next agenda for potential approval the FY 21-22 funding that is most urgent? Because I do know you made a motion for the pathways for us to implement it in June.
Yeah, we already voted on that. So that piece is,
We didn't vote on the funding.
so we need to go ahead and do that since we've all committed to that already. And I'm hoping that we can get enough information on the others to everybody, so everybody understands we start picking these off. I don't know that we can commit to all of it yet, just because there's still questions we don't know about. You know, roughly, if you look at, you know, that's 3.4 million plus, that's almost 4 million at the top of the heap just on parking and hospitality. So that would change what we have to spend, obviously, in 21-22. That I mean, $4 million can make a big difference in a lot of areas.
I would like to see us get going on the bunker gear.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, we have to get an approval on
Yep.
that, because that's part of the current.
Can we make a goal of getting the public health and the public safety areas on the next agenda? For
Well, I'd like to make a suggestion before that. If, you know, when you look at our budget for this operating budget for fiscal 21-22, with the number of vacancies that we're experiencing, I mean, there should be some significant surpluses somewhere in there. And I think, frankly, the right thing to do, now the Pathways project, we need to get that going immediately. But I would say the smart money says take this and look at it as you're developing your budget for next year, and see there may be things you want to spend out of a budget surplus instead of out of here, or vice versa. I mean, to me, to do two separate budget processes, I'm just not so sure if you end up putting things in the right places, if you know, or things that you may want to do.
That might be a great broad approach. I agree, but
I think we got to
For
do the bunker gear.
equipment.
We don't have the money for the bunker gear.
We may not, we've got the money for the bunker deal, it's just in another line item. So if you want to go ahead, if there are things like bunker, and again, certainly things like the pathways, I'm fine to it. But the rest of these things, like putting money and funds and this, that, and the other, I think you look at it as part of the budget process. I mean, it's not that far from June the 30th if you get down to it.
Well, one thing that I will add too It's Women's Day. It's Women's History Month. Is making sure that, so when we try to expend large sums of money like this and we have to go through the procurement process to buy these things, we don't need to put things off too long, because the process, the time that it takes to make sure that we spend the money, because I don't know if this is one of these things, if we don't spend it in time, that we lose it, or does it sit? I don't know.
Yes,
got
I would
4
imagine
years.
this will be a clawback.
It's a 4-year.
Right, yeah, so I've just known how some ideal projects start, and the process that it takes to actually spend the money can be a lot more lengthy than the conversation that we're having. So if we are all, the things that we have a consensus on, we just need to go ahead and start moving them, and not prolong the decisions, because I think we'll be here forever. I'm more than willing to go through a list of, I don't know if you want to pull out those things that you have concerns about and need further information on, but we do need to, we need a clear way forward that doesn't have us to going back and forth way too much on stuff. We need some definitive timelines for when we are going to make decisions, I think.
If
Mr.
I could
Taylor,
interject.
your concern, if we're having a surplus because of the lack of positions being filled, it's gonna come to the bottom line at the end of the year anyhow. So for us to use this money on projects we all agree on, with the exception of 2 or 3, I think it's just delaying. I think what Ms. Herbert is saying is correct. If we want the bunker gear, if we want the other public safety things, the pathways, let's go ahead and approve them.
And I think I was fairly clear when I said if there are things like pathways and stuff, fine, go ahead. But I would incorporate the rest of these things into our budget process.
Well, let's talk about which ones you want to incorporate in the budget process, which one you're ready to let go.
I mean, the public safety things, I'm fine with.
And public health,
No, sir.
COVID-related expenses for PPE testing, no.
I mean, we don't have a real number back yet, do we?
Close to $500,000.
Close to is not a real number, Howard, where I come from.
Yeah, do you
Close
have
to
the
is pretty
I
good
have
number.
I mean,
But I think we need to be able to approve parts of this and maybe at our next meeting. At least the public health and public safety. Then if Mr. Taylor disagrees with public health, we'll talk about that.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need to make that a part of our agenda. These are issues that been sort of swirling around that we have not definitively gotten through, and we need to really make a decision about this.
Well, I think we got to understand what we have, and two things in here that we don't have a clue on yet is the parking fund, and this fund underwater that's affecting us making bond covenants or anything, or is this just a filler? Because that's $4 million. We've already spent 5.2. We only got 13.5 right now. We can't commit to the 13.5 we don't have yet. So we want to make sure what numbers we have so that we can go through this and say, all right, we can commit to if it's public, I mean, just this public safety, if you just took all of them, you just wiped out all that money.
and let me say, I'm fine
Right.
with moving forward on the public safety.
Let's move forward on public safety and discuss public health.
Well, all the public health is a reimbursement into the general fund, which is frankly gonna be part of next year's budget. But
I have a suggestion. I mean, why can staff just bring us this budget and we take it line by line? And then that will determine what they need to go back and work on and what they don't. Oh, I'm sorry.
So Ms. Wilson sort of touched on the way we would have incorporated these funds would be in the upcoming budget. We would have included these items in the upcoming budget, and we would designate as a revenue source the amount equivalent to cover those expenses. We could detail out what those are, but also I think the point has been made, if that is not a path forward for a particular project, then let us know guidance-wise now so that we don't incorporate it into next year's budget. That would be one sort of thing, I think, to sort of give us some feel for. I don't think you're asked to approve anything by vote or motion, even today or even at the next council meeting, because a lot of it would be incorporated into the budget process. And it would only be for one fiscal year, of course, at that time.
But if they
actually,
wanted to,
that's
They
not-
could-
see, you
that's
and
not the
Teresa
case.
have talked about
Right.
the motion
A
that the
motion.
council or either budget amendment, the either option. We're trying not to get into budget amendments,
Right.
but
The pathways that
that-
we passed.
That would be a budget
three-year
amendment.
program with a June 1st implementation date, so that needs to be
A budget amendment.
approved next week. And I would tell you, I have no issue with any of the public safety things. I just would like to get a little more information on parking. Again, as the chairman of the community development and economic development, I've had no real introduction at all to the ones that are part of that. I'd like to have at least one committee meeting, and get reports on what we're accomplishing, and frankly, what they may want to do with that. So, before we pass, I just don't think that's too difficult to ask.
So you don't object to public safety
I think
being
we
a
all-
go for next
We
week?
should be all go on public.
Yeah.
The reason I say that, I would spend that money on public safety if we didn't
I have
have a surplus or not.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me add one thing, because y'all have talked two different pots, because we're talking about these funds here that Missy showed y'all, but we're also talking about any sort of, we'll call it surplus that comes through the operational that we don't spend in the current year. So, and the key to that, and the mayor brought that up, is we've only received 13 point something million, and we don't know for sure when, and, you know, depending on who you ask, if we'll get the other 13 million. So on some of these programs, as y'all are talking about the importance of them and moving ahead with them, maybe staff will be able to come back by next week and sit there and say, here's what we should use out of the ARPA funds. Here's what we believe we can use out of the operational dollars that we have left over in the current year, and bring that back to you. When we talk about hospitality, I will tell you, to me, that's really, they probably put that more for me. That's more a reserve. There's a good chance we will make our budget and meet the obligations on everything we agreed to vote on. I'm sorry, everyone that y'all voted that we agreed to pay in the current year, because hospitality tax collections are pretty solid, unless there's some weird spring that occurs. I just, you know, I can't tell you. The number we budgeted previously was much higher than that, 500,000. If we don't use that to meet any of the obligations in the current year, that's really 500,000 that can be applied to another project when we get the other 13 million. Parking is the same way. That's kind of a large number. I don't think we're going to need that amount, but it is really taking a look at the parking system as far as making sure that we meet, at least have created enough operating income along with funds from this to make our bond payments. And after that, we're not trying to build a fund reserve or anything like that in it. So we'll be able to show you, bring the numbers back. For the current year for parking, though, it's really just an estimate right now, but over the next couple months, we'll be able to tighten that number up as we get towards the end of the year. So I wouldn't expect us coming to y'all next week or even in the first meeting in April to even say, absolutely, please vote on hospitality and parking, because we won't have a final number on any of those either.
At this point, those are placeholders to help us reach the end of the fiscal year.
So you ready for public safety to go up next week?
I mean, the main items out of public safety that are numbers that in front of you are the numbers. The pathways program, I just handed you the budget. The demolitions, that's the number. The gear extractors and second set of bunker gear, that's the number. If you only want us to bring those three, we can bring those three, and we can give you backup on the additional items if you want us, if it fits within the tranche that we have after we've taken out the premium pay and the other public health initiatives. I mean, we have the number for how much we spend. I mean, we can tell you to the penny what the number is on how much we spend for COVID-related expenses. We could bring that. Those are the things, if it makes you more comfortable, that we know today. And we could bring that next week if that's what
Can we
your
do that?
choice
Yes, ma'am.
is.
Can you make it all
Yes,
public
ma'am.
health and public safety?
If that is what you would like us to do.
So
if-
public safety, the chief said he can get me the information I want for gun violence prevention, so
Just a reimbursement to our general fund. That's all it is.
No problem.
I think,
As long as it, yes, ma'am,
Yeah.
as long as
It's
it
just
fits
like-
within the
Yeah.
numbers here.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can certainly do that.
Use it somewhere else.
All right, so Missy, did you have
We all
another
agree
slide?
on public safety.
Okay,
Our time.
So it's consensual that we agree on public safety?
6 times.
I'm gonna ask you to repeat it twice, because last time you agreed to something.
I agreed to what? I want uniform.
You got both hearing aids on and everything, right?
That's right, I wanna make sure,
Public safety.
public safety.
So in the essence of time, I know Gloria's gonna go as quickly as she can. This is the other American Rescue Plan funding that we, have been allocated, but it's specific to the home program.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Now, was that public safety / health initiative?
Just public safety.
Just public?
Just the 5 lines under public safety.
Wait, hold
We're
it,
not
hold it.
there yet.
All right, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. We ready?
Yes,
Oh, no
ma'am.
problem, no problem. It's been fun listening to you all. So it's my turn. Again, I'm Gloria Saeed, Director for the City of Columbia's Community Development Department. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to give you an overview of the city's home ARP grant and the process required to submit an allocation plan to HUD. This plan is required to be submitted during this fiscal year. Action plan, so that can be amended before we submit our fiscal year 22 action plan, which is due to be submitted in May. So I just wanted to give that information. I know I've heard some keywords like deadlines, and if you make a decision to do something, you got to be able to move quickly. And so we won't have a problem with this particular presentation that I'm about to go over with you all. So, all right, so today's focus is going to be on 3 things. We're going to describe the eligible uses and the purpose of the home ARP allocation. We're going to talk about the development of the allocation plan, and we're also going to talk about the timeline to submit to HUD for review and approval. So, community development has been working on the allocation plan process since December, and I'm going to share some of the information that we gathered during that process through a required consultation process. Then there's still another required consultation process and a survey. And so you all do have a copy of the survey on your table. And then we'll talk about some of the information that came out of that briefly. So the American Rescue Plan, Home Rescue Plan, ARP, enabling legislation. So President Biden signed on March 11, 2021 into law the legislation for the home ARP. And so the goal for this particular pot of money is to reduce homelessness and increase housing stability across the nation. The City of Columbia has been awarded $2,580,020 in home, $820 in home ARP. So this is, of course, a separate allocation from our regular home entitlement that the city receives on an annual basis. The entire appropriation for this particular tranche of money is $5 million, but again, we got $2.5 million, which is slightly 10% less than what you all just talked about, the $27 million of the other home ARP dollars. So this is a one-time allocation, and how these funds are used for the long term, for long-term benefits is going to be crucial. So I'm hoping through this discussion we can talk a little bit about what you all have come up with thus far with your pathways plan to see how this particular pot of money can complement that. And Gloria, just for my clarification, we will only get the 2.5 million. We won't get the 5 million that you referenced earlier.
No, ma'am. It's 2.5. The total is 5 million across the country, but we got 2.5 million of that.
But
Well-
that is the total amount that we are getting.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
So we're gonna talk about, anyway, the home, ARP funds, the pandemic brought some things to our attention. Although we already knew prior to the pandemic, we already had issues with affordable housing or the lack thereof. And we also knew that we were dealing with some homelessness issues here locally, as well as nationally. But the pandemic actually made it worse. So we know now that there's an increased need for emergency shelters. We know that as a result of the pandemic, there's a reduced shelter capacity. We know that there's a need for use of non-congregate housing, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is. And we know that there's more people that now who are unsheltered that need shelter, and also fewer people are exiting the shelter to permanent housing. So we want to talk a little bit about, how these funds can help in that area. So with the Home American Rescue Plan, there are some eligible activities. The eligible activities include rental assistance, non-congregate shelter, and tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services activities. So I want to give just a few examples of what those eligible activities could include. For example, with rental assistance, it can include acquisition of standard rental housing. It can include construction of rental housing. It can include rehabilitation of rental housing. Under non-congregate shelters, is anyone familiar with that? Because that was a new term for me when they came out with this money. Yes. I'm sorry. I thought you had a question.
Great if you could tell a little bit more.
I thought you said it like,
NCS.
excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So for non-congregate shelters, that's defined as one or more buildings that provide private units or rooms for temporary shelter. It serves individuals and families that meet one or more of the qualifying populations. And then you can see that also to the right of the screen what qualifies as a qualifying population. And it does not require occupants to sign a lease or occupancy agreement. So it sort of reminds me of, in some cases too, of an SRO, a single room occupancy. All right. Are any of you familiar with the Oak Hill Apartments on Two Notch Road?
Yeah.
And so that's a SRO. And Forest Oaks is also, Forest Hill is also an SRO. And so those were hotels that were turned into single-room occupancies. Oak Hill is specifically for homeless individuals. And so, hearing some of what you were talking about with the new initiative, the Pathways, when you're looking at serving those individuals who are having some mental health crises, maybe some substance abuse, and just homeless in general, and they need some care, where they're going to go once they leave that facility, which I think is wonderful. I had an opportunity to read all about that and what it will include. But I think if we're looking at, what could be long-term, one of the options would be, some type of shelter where it's temporary housing, transitional housing, or even some type of permanent housing for individuals who want to get off the street. Everybody doesn't. But for those who do, these funds could in some way be used as gap dollars to help fund that type of project. So that's what the non-congregate housing is, and that fund for NCS could be used for acquisition of structures. It could be used for new construction, with or without land acquisition, and it can be used for rehabilitation of existing structures, such as the example I gave earlier, like motels or even nursing homes.
Can it be used for rental as well? As like paying rent?
Yes, I mean, there could be rent that could be charged. Of course, it would likely be affordable, because
I'm
of,
just thinking if, let's say you could find a hotel that you don't wanna spend all the money on things, but we could use $2 million to put folks from the pathway program into a bed for a period of time as we get them to the next wraparound services, that would qualify, correct?
yes, to use the funds for rental assistance. It's- Okay, I mean, that is eligible as well, because it talks about tenant-based rental assistance as well. I mean, I know there's a lot of need, but again, there's only $2.5 million. So, what we hope to gain from you all today is, what direction you would like us to go into as we finalize a draft allocation plan, so that, we can continue with the process before we can submit this to HUD. Another thing that it covers here is supportive services, and I'm just going to jump around a little bit because I'm just basing this on what I'm hearing from you all today. That, supportive services, in the event that that's something that you're interested in doing, it also covers that. So I can give you some examples of what will fall under supportive services as well. It could be costs to assist with childcare, educational services, life skills training, mental health services, outpatient health services, outreach services, substance abuse treatment services, case management, and, financial assistance costs. So it's a wide range of things. But again, what we're going to look for at the end of the day is, how these funds could best be used for long-term to assist the qualifying populations, which include individuals or families who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, other populations where assistance would prevent the family's homelessness or serve those with the greatest risk of housing instability. So there's a wide range of things, but at the end of the day, what I'm going to look for today is, some guidance into, where council would want to prioritize the use of these dollars, whether it be for housing under NCS, whether it be for supportive services, or any of those things that can be, tied into any of the other initiatives that you currently have in place.
Gloria, a quick question for you. Is this something that we could also, I know your timeline is tight, but discuss with our first task force meeting at the end of the month, just to give them an overview that this is coming our way, and that this could supplement some of the efforts that we are undertaking with that task force?
Well, we do have a very tight timeline. What I was hoping today is just based on the presentation that you have before you, the information that we have in the stakeholders survey, that we can at least get from council how they want to allocate those dollars. It's not specific to, how it would be used once HUD approves it. So if you say you want to use it for supportive services and housing, then that's what we would need to know. That's basically what we're going to ask for you so that we can continue to move forward, because we do have a very tight timeline to get this before the public for public comment, which is required, and then get it back before council for approval before we submit it to HUD. So I do have a timeline. Let's just talk about that on this page.
Mr. Heath, can I ask just a couple, 3 questions
Yes.
real quick? As a follow-up to Dr. Bustles.
Yes.
So the deadline to submit the application is June 30th?
Oh, no, sir.
I thought you said the end of this fiscal year earlier.
So we have to submit this allocation plan. I hadn't gone over the deadline to do that yet. But we have to do it, we have to submit it this fiscal year, and we need to do it before we submit our next annual action plan for the coming year.
Okay.
So that's the tight timeline that we have, that HUD has given us, to get this to them to approve before we give them our next action plan for approval.
So our action plan, what you're asking for today is kind of maybe some indications of how we might split this money.
Yes, sir.
And we still have a little bit of time to think through the allocations of how that, say, let's just say, for example, we said we wanted to put 3/4 of this money towards homeless programs. You still have time to look and see which homeless programs you might use.
Yes, so if you want to do that, at the end of the day, what we need to know is where you want to put it. Once it's approved, we can come back and decide how.
Okay. Well, would you, I
design
understand.
those.
I would ask that, you know, if we sooner rather than later, I think maybe you and it's Dr. Seed, right?
No, Gloria said.
Okay, good. To do that. The second question, can you get us the information of how much other communities in our metropolitan area are getting for this home program?
Absolutely.
I mean, what Richland County's getting, West Columbia's getting, what Casey's getting, kind of the whole picture?
Oh, absolutely. That will be pretty easy to get.
And would you ask HUD if the money that's received by an individual municipality or a county, is it restricted to be spent in that particular county?
I can certainly ask that.
What I'm saying is, for example, if the city of Columbia has put forth with a homeless program on this, and we're carrying the social burden cost in the city of Columbia, is it possible that we might ask some of the other communities out here to participate in the cost of these homeless programs or something like that through this same fund?
Absolutely.
Okay, just,
collaboration.
yeah.
Absolutely. So I can get that answer from HUD. I don't want to guess what it is, but yes, I can certainly do that, because that would make a lot of sense.
Well, to me, and it was a little bit amazing in the last, that's, okay, yeah, here, I would have thought it, okay, it's on the sheet from
Okay.
the earlier one. Richland County gets, 2.696 million. Lexington gets 2.6. I was surprised at the difference that the county got over the city in the ARA deal. I would have thought it would have been a little bit more here, but.
Right. So
I
there could
believe-
be some I mean, I know with some of our CDBG dollars, we've done collaborating projects with the county before. But sometimes, you know, they get into, you know, well, we don't want
I
to
understand.
spend our money in the city and things like that. but-
And let me say this, I understand very much so that, individual housing affordability issues are in every area of the Midlands, but I suspect the homeless issue is concentrated in one in particular.
So, and to go back to this, really we're focused on these eligible activities and how you'd like us to allocate or give you direction on what you'd like for us to focus on.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can tell you, based on the survey that we have already done, that you have in front of you, you can kind of see what some of the responses are. And stay with the mic. In some of the questions, it was a 10-question survey, and we left it out for responses from those organizations that serve homeless individuals, and or nonprofits that serve homeless individuals, state agencies, housing authorities. They're the ones that responded to the survey, and you can kind of see, where they felt the most need was on each of these 3 questions. And so housing seemed to kind of always come through, but there was information that they provided as needs as well as it relates to supportive services. And also, non-congregate housing. So, again, any type of affordable housing, whether it's,
a shelter, a SRO, or whatever, it would benefit the area and certainly those individuals that we're trying to get off the street.
Yeah, and I agree with you that non-congregate housing is going to be the most important approach to ensure people have stable housing and permanency. One thing I do want to point out, and this is nothing towards you all, but something to keep in mind with my researcher hat on, is there was 35 people that responded to this, and 6 of those were the same people from Mercy or from Homeless No More. So we may also be seeing a slight trend towards wanting to support certain services because of who responded. And so I think it's important for us to keep that potential skew in mind. And so that's why I asked if it would be possible for us to engage with other folks. And I can talk with you offline on the best way to do that, just to make sure we're trending in the right direction in terms of, in addition to that permanent affordable housing, what are some other things they'd like to see?
Right. And I will say, too, it could be, sometimes with those agencies, more than one person responded that works at the agency. But through additional information, through the public comment period, and also because we do have to, we're required to have a public hearing. So that's an opportunity for us to still get additional information before a final decision is made on the plan and submitted to HUD.
And some of that additional information, directly to your point, Dr. Bustles, and I was telling Gloria, some of my concern, which I totally respect the survey results and those providers' responses. However, and I think it's been more enlightening in the last few weeks as you all have had the conversations about the task force and the Pathways program for Gloria. A lot of times we're all working and doing what we're doing and focused on. And so for Gloria, she was saying, well, how then, now knowing this, can these funds complement, as she said earlier, the other efforts and the priority that I think this council is focusing on right now, the visible homelessness, also particularly the individuals in mental crisis, et cetera. And so what was a glaring miss, I think, for me, and that we need to use this opportunity, is to pull in mental health. And we've talked with Allison Farrell a lot after you made that connection, and we had already been talking with some of her colleagues. But I do think it's very important. Again, I keep reiterating, as we are putting the emphasis on the Pathways program, funding it, enhancing it, there's still that gap, and Allison reiterated that to me, that yes, there is a building that's been identified for the individuals to go to, that our Pathways teams will work with and literally take them, but it only houses maybe 10 individuals at a time from my memory. So that is not going to be sustainable. And again, if some of these other, I guess, I don't know which category it could fall under, several, but if it's supportive services, I'm not sure, but how we could connect those dots to make sure if this funding could be used. But to your point, I think, if someone like Allison Farrell had responded to the survey, her responses may have been very different than some of the other providers here.
Yeah, so I would suggest to council that what we focus on with these, or what we kind of shift our direction to, I don't know what the right words are, but is what are the 4 categories?
Okay, sorry.
The non-congregate shelter and then the supportive service activities. Those are the 2 things that I have heard as somebody engaged in this work outside of being a city councilwoman, as well as some of the conversations that Ms. Wilson has referred to. And, it's also an evidence-based approach to provide stable housing and then support those that are experiencing the mental health crises. It could also help build out some of our initiatives with CPD and public safety. I just told you the buckets. I don't know the percentages yet. I'm just bringing that to the table.
Well, and the question I had too, because I agree, the non-congregate shelter is something that we need a lot more of, and I think that you could have permanent results from and see the data and results. The question is, what can you do with 2.5 million?
Not a lot. So
that's the other part of the concern. But then I don't want to put money into something that we'll say, well, for a whole year,
yes,
we were able to help 20 people. I don't know if you have any recommendations, but as far as getting the most bang for our buck. And the other thing is, did we talk to any homeless folks or previously homeless folks in the survey?
We did not. What we did, based on what HUD actually did mandate, is that we consult directly with those service providers.
Okay,
And so that's the part that we have completed.
I got you.
The other part is the public meeting and the public comment. We have not done that yet. So to your point, Councilwoman Bustles, that would be an opportunity to get some additional input and feedback to support those other areas.
Is that the one
I've
you
seen
mailed
that.
out?
Yes.
Did you email it out? Is that the one you emailed?
I think so.
Okay, I have it in my stack of reading.
Information in it. I think it'll help answer some of your questions when it comes about what folks are saying. I think it's very helpful for our discussion.
Thank you.
So, Councilwoman Herbert, to answer your question, though, in terms of, you know, whatever we decide, what percentage, which I would like to have something today, if I could, so that we can work up the draft action plan. But to your point, this amount of money won't do an entire project. What you would want to do is, you know, in the event we go into the direction for the non-congregate shelter, is that whoever the nonprofit or developer is who takes on that project, they will seek other sources of funding, perhaps through the United Way. I understand that they do have some funding available that could be another source, because again, this is just gap funding. But it would be an opportunity to be that source of funding for a larger project.
Can it go towards another agency or entity that secures a location? That is not developed, that is not built out.
Like for new construction?
No, if it may already, it may be that they need gap financing in a purchase or whatever it might be.
Yes, and they would maybe adapt it to this purpose.
That's what DMH
Absolutely.
is doing now. They've secured a location through another entity.
Right. Well, I would not see why that would be a problem, because some of the examples used before is like an old hotel or a nursing home. So if it's a building that can be adapted for this purpose, but we can certainly check, but I wouldn't think that that would be an issue if it's going to be used for that type.
Could it be used
Purpose.
for what Ms. Wilson is saying, I guess, along that path? Loans, low-interest loans, repayable for developers to go down that path, providing the residential type stock that we're talking about, where it comes back to us. Is it a one-time spend, or can we put together a loan program where we can really stretch it out?
You're making my head swim. I don't know specifically for this. I know with our other grants, we have revolving loan programs already established. But that's a whole nother process.
Well, because it is expensive for the construction component, and this might be a way to get the biggest bang for your buck
It
for
is,
that program.
that's true, but on the other side of that, the administrative burden of that in managing it,
But if
you
you
know,
just
on the
do one
staff side.
project,
Pardon me?
but if you only do one project,
That's
really
true
easy.
too. That's
it's
possible.
real easy.
I'm gonna write that down just to see if that could be, if those funds, if it's meant for those funds to be loaned, I can certainly do that.
Check the box for innovative approach on it, and we'll go that route.
Okay.
I think,
Out of the box.
based on the surveys and based on the situation that we have with the homeless, we really gotta focus on that.
Mm.
I probably have heard more about homelessness over the last month than I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
It seems to be really creating concerns all the way around, both with, even when you look at the volume of folks, it touches between fire and EMS and police, and the pathways is a start, but we gotta have a place to help folks get that as we start to transition them, because we can't longer, we need to make sure so that we can get folks into a safe place that then we can get the wraparound services. And that support service activities around it are gonna be a key to it as well, because I think there's a lot of folks who don't know what's out there. And there's also, you know, understanding the hurdles that are in the way for folks to get services too. And I think we've got to make sure that we hit both of those as we're discussing this moving forward.
Well, thank you for that. And I can honestly say, if it were one project, Ms. Wilson, to your point, if it was that building that would be upfitted, that would have the services right there on site, I mean, that would be wonderful. So they won't have to go anywhere. They're living right there where they're getting the case management and those services that they need.
Our biggest hurdle with that concept, unfortunately, is nobody wants it in their neighborhood. I mean, let's be realistic.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's our toughest battle right now, is where to do it. So how do we take care of those folks' immediate needs now?
It's a problem from Harbison to Forest Drive to Leesburg Road now.
It's a citywide. It really has become I think we get calls every day from different parts about what we can do to help folks.
So in terms of what I'm hearing, and again, this is for us to discuss, but I still am hearing some sort of consensus around non-congregate and support services. One suggestion would be, okay, so it's 2.5, right? 90 go towards shelter, 10% go towards supportive, because it does take a lot to create shelters that will be effective in doing what they need to do. Or we can decide that maybe we want to tweak that a little bit and put more towards these mental illness programs if we are investing and we're all in, given some of the caveats of we're not sure of whether or not we can, as Ms. Wilson asked, fund DMH's existing initiative.
Is 10% enough in supportive services?
Of 2.5 million, that's several hundred thousand.
250? You think more, Howard?
I think maybe more than.
If we say that we're putting 100% towards homelessness, do we have to give a breakdown between so that we can really see what that number is? Because it could fluctuate.
Yeah, that's my,
So, so we would have to do our budget, because there are some other considerations to take into account. One of them being planning and administration and planning, which is what we would charge for the administration and
what
planning.
percentage is that?
It's 15% of the overall grant.
Up to 15, right?
Well, we're allocating the entire 15 in this case, because what we do with that is that's how we augment our staff salaries. And so that's how we're using that.
We were doing it at 5, right?
But with all of our grants, and I know there'll be an opportunity to talk about all of them, you know, at some other point, you know, a large portion of what community development's staff is paid by is through grant funds. It's based on that percentage that we can charge each year. And so that's how this is structured. That is allowable.
I would just ask us to take a look at that, because that's taking, what, $400,000
It's $375,000. So if it's not charged there, then it would fall onto the city's general fund to augment those salaries.
Dr. Bussel's
I want to revisit this. So I'm looking at this Pathways ARPA budget of essentially, you know, it seems like to me, if you do need percentages, somewhere in the 500,000 ballpark is what I would be interested in dedicating towards the continued mental illness and substance use prevention efforts among those experiencing the homelessness, and the rest go towards stable shelter and housing. That would be my suggestion to council.
Okay. We can work that and put it in the draft and show you, Ms. Wilson, we can get that as soon as tomorrow, because that won't take a hard lift to
Are you,
do that
are
calculation.
we allowed to make adjustments at any point? Since we're just having the ballpark without any solid numbers, I want to make sure we have flexibility if we need to go one way or another.
You do until the time that we submit it to HUD, so you still have some.
And we'll have public comment so we can tweak after that, I think. And
So
April 5th
this is kind of
the
our
vote.
starting point,
Yeah.
and then we can tweak it in and we can take a look at it. That makes
Yes.
sense.
What are the two categories again? I want to be clear. You said
The non-congregate housing and the support
support.
services, yeah.
So again, we've already consulted with agencies and service providers whose clientele include home ARP qualifying populations. We've held a stakeholder meeting with those same agencies just to, get further feedback. Right now, we're in the process of developing the action plan, which your information today is helping us move that forward. And so the next steps is for the ARP allocation plan proposed draft to be posted on March 11th, which is Friday, which is why we'll move very quickly to get these adjustments made and get it out to everyone. And then there's a 15-day public comment period that starts on March 13th and ends on March 28th. That is required. And then we're also required to have a home ARP virtual public hearing. We've counted to where we want to make sure the plan is out there for public view and comment for at least 10 days. So we've projected a public hearing, a virtual public hearing to occur on March 23rd. And then we'll bring it back to City Council for approval. And of course, between that time, I'll be working with City Manager Wilson and ACM Gentry to make sure that we're circulating and getting you all the information that you need for review. And then, once we get council approval, we'll submit it to HUD for review for an approval on April 8th.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
Just for process, after the 15-day comment period, and then you've got the public hearing, you'll let us know what the comments were and the feedback so that we're aware prior to the council approval on the 5th.
Thank you all very much.
The final item is simply your schedule. I know many of you had asked to have the dates firmed up for the budget workshops rather than just saying all of the off Tuesdays. So I tried to give us some time that, we're still working through budget items. We can front load that, and we just have a final Tuesday in March and a final Tuesday in April to meet with you, and then we'll kind of get a little bit heavier in the meetings. And also Tyler St. Clair has provided your council retreat reports and a draft vision and strategic outcomes document for you to look at in advance of her coming back, if you all agree for her to do that on April 20th and 21st. She said she only needs a day and a half, ideally. So I was just seeking some feedback on that. If those dates work, they're within your, they're listed on your,
I put it on my calendar,
Calendar.
but do you have any times during those days?
so she wanted me to find out from you all what worked
Okay.
best. She said a day and a half, so I assume she means a
2
day
days
and a
out.
half. Like a
20
whole day.
20th and 21st.
Yes.
Wasn't it 20th?
April, right?
And it's on the, I think
and I can
that,
be in
is
Kentucky.
that not in your council meeting dates should be in your information, your package, I think.
You can give me your proxy and I'll vote.
Wow.
It would take a death wish.
We may have a conflict.
Okay,
Scheduled to be out of town during that period.
all right. She offered the, I think that was a Wednesday, Thursday, right? So she offered the 27th and the 28th as well. She preferred the 20th and the 21st, but she said,
Yeah, I think 27, 28.
okay. Is that the consensus for everyone? April 27th, 28th? Okay.
A full day on the 27th and a half day on the 28th.
That is what she asked for, yes, sir. But
Okay.
if we, Ms. Herbert cannot do the 28th,
I mean, I could do till about 10.
on the 28th.
Clear the end of the month.
Full day on 27, a half day on 28, and Councilman Herbert, councilperson. Full day on the 27th, and I think Tina said she couldn't come, but half day on the 28th.
Tell her to squeeze it in. You just drink your positivity tea and no comment, we'll be all right.
Be home by noon.
No, I got one. That Howard's.
Okay, April 27th and the morning of the 28th. Thank you. Do they have to do a motion to go? They can't even do a motion to go in executive session, right? All right, so we just have this final item, which is contractual, so I would need to. I'm sorry? You all can do a motion to go into executive session.
I would make a motion, we go into executive session.
Second.
And that would be just council and the city manager, please.
Discussion of negotiations
Have a
and proposed
presentation.
contractual arrangements pursuant to 30-4-70A2 Executive Management and Leasing Incorporated.
And so, for this executive session, I need the assistant city managers because this is
I wanna
involved
have
with-
this, that's fine, then we'll have it without, just we'll have an executive session without council, I mean, without staff afterwards.
Whatever you
Okay.
prefer. I just have to do a presentation, and so the presentation is, the staff has put it together with me. But if you want me to do the presentation by myself, I'm happy to do that too.
I think we need the assistant city managers on this thing. They got the background information for what we're gonna discuss. Yeah, motion is to go into executive
we had
session
a-
for the,
And I seconded it.
We had the first and the second. Vote. Call the roll. Yes, ma'am. We had a.
aye.
Aye.